Hello and welcome. To talk about some of the geopolitical trends that are likely to play themselves out over the year 2024, we are joined at the India Engagement Center at the World Economic Forum in Davos by the President and the Chief Executive of the Atlantic Council, one of the world's leading think tanks, Fred Kempe. Thank you very much for joining us. With us also is Asha Jadeja Motwani from the Motwani Foundation. Thank you very much, Asha, for being here. 2024 is the year of elections. More than half the world's population goes to the polls. Some of the world's biggest democracies will be polling this year, including the United States, India, and Indonesia. But the world's attention focused quite a lot on US politics. And that's where I want to kickstart this conversation, Frederick, because what happens in the US will to a great extent determine how the world shapes up from here. Especially given the prospects of Donald Trump winning a Republican nomination, potentially even becoming president again. From your prism at the Atlantic Council and individually, how do you see the US elections playing themselves out from January to November?
So I'm a geopolitical thinker. I try to steer away from domestic politics, but let me take a try. First of all, I think our domestic divisions, our polarization, is perhaps the greatest national security danger to the United States, and Americans are sick of it. Americans, the majority, 45%, so the largest party in America is the independent party. There isn't an independent party, but that many people consider themselves independent. I'm one of those people. The majority of Americans don't want Trump. They don't want Biden. It looks, right now, conventional wisdom is they both will be the candidates and one of them will win. I'll give you a radical prediction. It won't turn out that way. Now, I can't tell you what will happen, but we're in a volatile world. Every year this decade, we've had a surprise. COVID in 2020, the Afghan disaster for the U.S. Withdrawal 2021, without which Putin would not have invaded Ukraine 2022. And then you have the Hamas terrorist attack on Israel, Gaza 2023. What makes you think we're not going to have a surprise in 2024? And maybe it will have to do with the elections.
But let me build on that. What is it that you're picking up or seeing that makes you feel that either Trump or Biden or both could get knocked out before they actually get the nomination?
So, Biden has so many legal cases going against him. Who knows where the Supreme Court is going to come down in terms of the states have said he can't be part of it. So he has his legal issues. He's also not a young man. Biden has potential age, potential health issues. You have third-party candidates that could throw a wrench into the works. It's also a year where there will not be a primary challenge to Biden. So the challenge there is really Biden himself, and does he stay healthy? Odds are he'll stay healthy. With Trump, I think it's a much more volatile situation. And so I think we have to watch that. And I think the third-party candidates could really throw off the Electoral College. The election could well end up being decided by the House of Representatives in the end with the Electoral College. It could be an electoral year like none other in the United States, or none recently.
Asha, from your lens in Silicon Valley, how do you see the U.S. presidential elections play out from where we're at right now?
So from the Valley's perspective, Rahul, I think we are actually quite removed from Washington, D.C. politics. So we tend to be, shielded from what's going on in Washington, D.C. simply because, we just don't engage much with with D.C. But that said, I think California and Silicon Valley are, squarely center left. They are actually, California is a democratic state. And I think in general, there is we're all supporting Biden, and whoever else Biden is, is going to be running with. I personally hope that Biden was not running simply because of his age and health issues. So for me, it would have been actually much more exciting if it was somebody like Gavin Newsom, the current governor of California, who was running instead of President Biden. But whatever way, whoever runs from the Democratic side, chances are we'll be supporting the Dems. So that's where I think, and we, as far as, if let's say, and if you look at a scenario where Trump wins, let's say, which I do think is a possibility, it's a real possibility. even if Trump wins, here's what I think. I don't think he's going to crack down on big tech simply because he doesn't understand where things are heading right now. And he's obsessed much more about, Ukraine and NATO and all kinds of other things at this point. So I don't think he's going to really do much damage to the tech sector. On another sector, which I think where Trump is going to actually have impact if he comes, it'll be on relations with India. And he's such a fan of India that, like Biden, that I think, if irrespective of who's on board there in White House, it's going to be next, decade where it's going to be an India-centered, sort of focus on Indo-Pacific.
Fred, how do you see the geopolitical consequences of the American presidential elections? Whoever wins, how do you see that impact America's policy when it comes to its relations with the world?
So the Atlantic Council, we're a bipartisan, nonpartisan organization. We worked effectively with President Obama, with President Biden, with President Trump, with President Bush. And to be honest, I don't see dramatic differences. Toward India, Asha was saying this, no dramatic differences. Toward China, no dramatic differences. I don't even think that a President Trump turns against NATO. I don't think in fact that will go in the direction that a lot of people fear. The American people are looking for order. They're not looking for chaos. And you're even seeing Trump campaign against Biden as the person who creates chaos. And of course, Biden is campaigning against Trump as the person who creates chaos. Americans don't want chaos right now. Americans want the two sides to come together.
Doesn't Trump signify chaos?
His campaign is going in a totally different direction. He wants to be disruptive, no doubt about that. But I think right now, America needs a period of time. Everyone's investing in America. We continue to innovate. People want to go to our schools. And so we all have a great time talking about our political scene. But the political scene tends not to make as much difference over time in the United States. This election could be different. But as I said, we have a brilliant tendency to self-correct. And I think this period of polarization, the paralysis, the nastiness right now in American politics, I think over time this self-corrects because it doesn't work.
Let's look at some of the big geopolitical concerns this year. Primary amongst them, of course, is the Israel-Hamas war. And I want your sense of how you see the conflict in the Middle East play out from here between these two parties and on the prospects of escalation.
So I'm an optimistic person. One of my mentors was the former Secretary of State, late Secretary of State, Madeleine Albright, who said, I'm an optimist who worries a lot. So I'm an optimist who worries a lot. We are in a situation where we have the best prospects for a lasting solution to the region. And what I mean by that is it's now obvious to everyone, you can't just ignore the Palestinian situation. There has to be a Palestinian state over time. It's obvious. It's also obvious to everyone. Sorry?
It is to the rest of the world, but is it to Israel?
It will become over time. Where Israel's security, you have to, Hamas has to lose, the Palestinians have to win, Israel has to be secure. How do you achieve that? I think the Abraham Accords were genius. The coming together of moderate Muslim states, and the Atlantic Council has done a lot to support that initiative. The U2, I2, UAE, United States, India, Israel, which was a form like the Abraham Accords. Again, brilliant initiative. The only lasting security in the Middle East will come through normalization between Israel and its moderate Muslim neighbors. That is possible coming out of this, but the war has to end a little bit faster than perhaps some in Israeli leadership would like it to end. Then I think you have a real chance for the region to go through a real time. And let's not forget what the critical problem in the region is. Yes, it's Hamas. Yes, it's the Houthis. It's Iran. What does Iran need? Iran needs chaos in order to distract its own unhappy population from what they're not providing. If you have Saudi Arabia, United Arab Emirates, Jordan, Egypt, Israel, Morocco, other states growing, prosperous, modernizing, with Iran still a mess, a mess for its people, not providing for its people, over time it goes the way of the Soviet Union, which is by being surrounded by a moderate, prosperous, modernizing set of countries. So I think ultimately we'll go in that direction. And part of the reason we had Hamas when it happened was we were relatively close to a Saudi-Israeli normalization, which would have been a huge breakthrough in the region. And among other things, the Hamas terrorist attacks threw that off kilter.
The United States' support of Israel through the violence and aggression in Palestine, in the West Bank, in Gaza, has given dictators like Putin, and maybe even Xi, even though he hasn't spoken about it, a stick to beat the US with, bringing out America's hypocrisy when it comes to allowing Israel to do what it did. And Putin says, if Israel can do what they're doing in Palestine, then I'm doing the same in Ukraine. So that's leading to a big pushback against the US outside of the United States, where the US is being accused of being hypocritical towards Israel.
Yeah, I disagree with most of what you've said. The situation is that you had the biggest attack on Israel, the biggest attack on the Jewish people since the Holocaust. 1,400 people. I've seen the film. I've watched the 47-minute movie. One the most bestial terrorism you will ever see in your entire life. So Israel had to strike back. Israel deterrence wasn't working any longer. Now the question is, has Israel gone too far? Is Israel acting and playing into Hamas's hands and Iranian hands by going a little bit too far? Don't know. I think time will tell. Be patient about this, because I think in the end, this could turn the region in the right direction. I think the Palestinians have got to see that Hamas is not getting them closer to a Palestinian state right now. So Hamas cannot be their future. That can't be the way that they go through. And the world looks for any excuse to be anti-American. If this will come, this will go. And in the end, I think the real issue is Hamas losing, the Palestinians winning, Israel being secure, and a moderate, modernizing coalition of normalizing states in the region.
Asha, what's your reading of the current situation in the Middle East?
So I have two views on this. One is more optimistic view. The optimistic view kind of echoes somewhat what Fred is saying, that in the long run, if Israel does this right and the US backs it at the right time in the right direction, then there will be some kind of a peaceful two-state solution and Israel is secure, Hamas is gone, But I also have this other sort of pessimistic view that this is not going to end soon, because the level of support that Hamas has in Gaza, and to some extent now even in West Bank, is almost 75 to 80% from the civilian population. So I do feel that this thing is not going to go away that easily, and Hamas is not really a group of people. Hamas is actually an ideology which is steeped in Islamization of society. It is the Muslim Brotherhood, and it has its own sort of core set of ideas which are rooted in scripture. And so this is not going to be that easy to root out. If it doesn't, if Israel is not really able to sort of get rid of Hamas fast enough, we are looking at this war escalating. In the worst case scenario, I see calls for regime change in Iran. And if that happens, US is going to be drawn into this war. It will be a bloody war, but it will be a good thing for the rest of the planet in 5 years from now.
What's your take on the prospects of escalation? We're going from no, the parties are rational, they'll be able to handle it, won't escalate, to a lot of experts feeling escalation is now inevitable.
The escalation comes if Iran decides to escalate. Iran will not escalate because it's too dangerous for Iran to escalate. And I think the Iranians know that. As long as they're acting through proxies. You were talking about the comparison between Ukraine and the Middle East. One of them is it's two cases of state-sponsored terrorism. Russia is a state terrorist acting against Ukraine. Iran is a state terrorist acting through Hamas and acting through the Houthis and Hezbollah in their region. And I think that's the two breaks on escalation are a couple of aircraft carriers from the United States in the region. It sent a very strong message. And Iranians' own knowledge that they're better off acting through proxies, they're better off continuing a situation of chaos. If they get dragged into it themselves, it's too dangerous for them. So I think you might have some escalation with Hezbollah, but Hezbollah is in the same situation. They've almost become a status quo power in Lebanon. And for them to bring the wrath of Israel down upon them is not in their interest either. So I think there's a danger, and there's a greater danger now given what's going on in the Red Sea, but I still don't think it escalates to the extent that it gets out of hand.
For the last couple of years, the number one concern at the World Economic Forum in Davos had been the Russia-Ukraine war. Now we're seeing President Zelensky increasingly frustrated with the world's attention, he feels, moving away from Russia-Ukraine and aid not coming to Ukraine soon enough. And even though he doesn't say so, the concern in Ukraine is that maybe Russia will soon start getting the upper hand. What's your reading, Fred?
I regret that the United States and its partners didn't get Ukraine more meaningful military support in 2023. I think 2023 was a critical year, and by not giving them the support they needed faster, we've given Russia a chance to dig in. I think 2024 will be a year where Ukraine needs to hold, and then it's made quite a bit of advance in the Black Sea, and I think most important will be for it to have some breakthroughs in the south. If Ukraine can get through 2024 without losing where it is, I don't think it's going to make great gains in the north and the east. But I think in the south it could make gains, and in the Black Sea it's already made great gains. And I think what one has to do is, if one can imperil Crimea and turn Crimea from a strategic asset of Russia into a strategic peril, that could force Putin to the negotiating table in a more flexible fashion than he's now willing to come.
Mm-hmm. One of the things that I'm picking up, Fred, is that the Atlantic Council wants to focus a lot more on India than it has in the past. Do you want to just share your reading of the India growth story at the moment? If you see the promenade at Davos, it almost seems as if there's an Indian takeover of Davos.
So I'll try to say this short, but it could be an hour-long speech. I'm not going to bother you with that. But we're in an inflection point in history. It's a period of time as important for the world as the periods after World War I, periods after World War II, period after the Cold War. And no doubt the United States will be important in shaping this future. And the pieces you're talking about, the Middle East, the war in the Middle East, war in Europe, tensions around China. We haven't even talked about technology yet, but technological change is quick as it's ever happened. And in this period of time, at this inflection point, a group of countries are going to shape the future. What's new is India will be right at the top of that list of countries that's going to shape the future. We at the Atlantic Council want to both understand India more. There's no place you look in the world any longer where you don't find India present in business, in politics, in technology, whether it's Africa, whether it's Latin America, United States, of course, the Gulf, huge populations and also huge relationships there. So the bilateral relationship is going to be of increasing importance between India and the United States as the world's two largest democracies. But I also think understanding India and its role in the global south, which is a very positive role, and its role around the world, the Atlantic Council is going to devote a great many more resources toward that.
Asha, it's interesting how in the United States there's now greater appetite than there has been in the past about wanting to engage with the India story, and the support for the relationship with India is quite bipartisan.
Yes, it is. But what's the question though, Rahul?
So the question is, how do you see this playing itself out in the years to come?
I mean, there's no stopping it now. It's already, it has already taken off. And what you find right now is impatience on the US side to close on a few deals in India, both from the private sector, from company perspective, and from the policy perspective. They want to close a few things which are in the pipeline right now. It's India which is slow. So I feel that this momentum, I think, of sort of closing on a few partnerships, few policy decisions, few some long-term partnership activities, all those things can be done if there was a set of actors working on it. And I feel right now already there's an active participation from the diaspora, from think tanks, from universities, and from India, of course, from the government side. But I wish that there was, from my perspective, I wish that the bureaucracy was more on board towards accelerating this partnership. I also feel that this is the time to start speaking about a free trade agreement between the two countries, because both United States and India are looking at expanding their GDP fast, and the fastest way to do this is if there was an FTA between the two nations. There is going to be pushback in India, more of a pushback from rural sectors and so on, and perhaps similar kind of a little bit of pushback even from US side on manufacturing. But that said, the imperative of sort of serious wealth creation, if there was an FTA, is so huge right now, and the momentum has begun. I actually don't think that there's going to be any slowdown on that. So I hope that we have serious participation from all stakeholders on this activity.
Fred, from your perch at the Atlantic Council, what is it about the India story that excites you the most, and what is it that concerns you the most?
First of all, I want to compliment Asha, and I think Asha represents something that's happening in the United States, which is the Indian diaspora. They're Americans, patriotic Americans. They're proud to be Americans. They have succeeded more wildly in the United States than, my parents were both German immigrants. The German immigrants did pretty well in the United States. I think India is the immigrant success story of the moment in the United States. India has not yet discovered its voice in terms of the relationship with India. And this doesn't mean they're not going to be loyal to the United States. Of course they are. But Italian Americans love working with Italy, and German Americans with Germany, and Greek Americans and so forth. The difference here is you have this incredibly influential diaspora at a time when India, and I'll answer your question now, what excites me about India? The demographics, the education, the technological know-how, the global presence. India is a country on its way up, no doubt about it. It's already established, but I think it's going to become a more important player over time. And it's a more important player that doesn't have a lot of people that are opposed to it being an important player. The Global South, India embraces the Global South. The Global South embraces India. The United States wants to work with India. Europe wants to work with India. So I think that's good. What have I got that I worry about a little? I do think India, in a situation like Ukraine, has to make a value judgment. I think India, on the global stage, as it takes on a bigger global role, when it sees situations where a border is being wiped out, a country is being under attack, I think with global influence comes global responsibility. We in the United States don't always handle it properly, but it's going to be more and more difficult choices are going to be faced in the future, and it doesn't. There's nothing in it that frustrates me. I just think it's going to be a reality, and it's going to be interesting to see how India develops in that direction.
And finally, Asha, we're also seeing now the current government try and leverage into what Fred is describing, the power of the Indian diaspora, whether it is through Indian Americans or elsewhere, like Jews in the United States, have been so influential in domestic politics because the Indians were split on both sides, never really mobilized as a channel of political influence. That's something that now seems to be changing quite fast.
Yes, I think the Indian diaspora there is divided into multiple sort of groupings, so to speak. Okay, there is of course the tech sector, which is perhaps the most powerful, also the most active and more and aware, self-aware of influence that it can have, compared to, let's say, the group of people that might be more doctors and dentists. There's a large chunk of that also people in the medical field. But that's different. That's a different diaspora, which actually is activist, but it's activist in a different realm. The tech diaspora, I think, is the one which is beginning to wake up and realize that it has to exercise some political influence in Washington, D.C. now. And people like myself are the first few bakras, so to speak, who are sticking our necks out and dabbling in Washington, D.C., right? Hanging out with people, understanding how Washington, D.C. Rolls. And I think I'm going to see, we are going to see much more of that as we go forward in terms of, just plain old activism from the Indian side. And I think there's also another thing that I'm noticing right now is the level of support that we are getting from India. So the other day, I'll give you an example, Rahul. The other day, I got a call from somebody in New Delhi. I forget the gentleman's name, but he said he got my number from Minister Jaishankar. And he said, I want to reach out to you and I want you to know that if you are in Delhi, you must stop by and meet the minister. I had mentioned this to him at the Carnegie Institute, the global technology conference that was happening in Delhi, and I had, cornered the minister and said, well, can I speak to you or something? And he didn't have the time that day. But how much of regard he must have for the diaspora to ask his assistant to say, look, reach out to this lady and tell her that I'm interested in meeting if you are in Delhi. This is a new India. This is a very new government and the mindset that I've never seen before. So
We look forward to tracking your next steps, and we wish you all the best. Thank you very much for taking our time and joining us at Davos. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Rahul.